I'm going to start with my daughter. She's my second daughter. I have two. I have an older daughter, Zahra, and this one is, well, I named her at birth, I named her Zainab. Now, she is currently working as a writer, and she's looking to do adult fiction. And some of the exploration that's going on in adult fiction at the moment is around faith. And is faith something that should come into adult fiction, young adult fiction? And a lot of young adult fiction is very much in the realm of, I don't know, space or the future, or what the future is going to be like, or whatever. And she's recently tweeted something to the effect of, well, faith is something that she's trying to escape all of her life, and now suddenly it's come right up against her and she's having to deal with it. Why is that? When I wrote the blurb for the talk this afternoon, it came as a result of her having interviewed me about this very topic of identity. And part of the reason that she wanted to write on this and to interview me is because she chose to change her name. Now, her name was given to her by myself and her father because we had spent 3 years living in Iran. And for us, Zainab was the daughter of Ali and Fatima. She was a strong personality. She spoke up against injustice, spoke up against tyranny, and so we saw her as a very powerful leadership figure for our daughter. But what did that name mean for my daughter? It meant something very different. Yes, it did mean that she had to speak up at times. I sent her to a monastery in the desert, a monastery in the deserts of Syria, before all of the troubles. And she lived there for 6 months. And everybody that she met from Syria, now this is a Christian monastery used to interfaith dialogue. It's an area that's predominantly Muslim, but everybody in this monastery asked her, how come you have a Muslim name? Why don't you change your name? Now, at that point, she very much owned her name. She said, I have a right to have a name that I have. And she was quite, she was quite vocal about it. But when she came back, she realized that she really wanted a name that was her, that represented who she was. And she was worried about how I would react to this. And I thought, you know what, that's okay, let's talk this through. So she came up with the name Elva. Now, Elva is an old European name. It has a couple of meanings. One of it comes from olive, and we talked through the meaning of the olive in faith traditions and in the Middle East, and actually also within Europe, and that the olive tree, olive oil is used for light, for lamps, it's used for cooking, it's used for the skin, the olive is used as a food, the tree is used for wood, so there's something very special about the olive tree. And then also, we loved Lord of the Rings and all of that, so Elva, Elven, elves, all of that sort of thing. So Elva was the name that she chose for herself. This was identity. And there was also within this need to be her self-chosen identity, a need for a sense to belong, to not be put into a box, either by a teacher or fellow friends that said she's something odd or something that we can't pronounce or something that, we can't really quite identify where she belongs. She didn't want to be put into some kind of an odd box. She wanted to be who she was for herself. And there is in that a need to belong, because however much you might hear this, where we're all in competition with one another, actually, we are social beings. We're created to need one another, to be with one another, to not live on our own, but to love and to care for one another. One of my favorite authors is not a writer who comes from a position of faith. He actually says that he's secular. This is Alain de Botton. He writes a lot on love, a lot of things, he's not in bed, but he writes on love. And he says, we want to be loved for who we are, warts and all. We want to be safe with the person who loves us. We want to know that even though we've got all these really weird things that each of us are a bit weird in our own ways, we want to be loved for that. And we also need to learn how to love others with all their imperfections. And that sometimes those imperfections are actually things of beauty that we learn to love even more. We love them even more because of their imperfections. I think there's a Christian concept, but I don't think it's alone, that God is love. And we're called, our supreme commandment is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and all our strength, and to love our neighbours as ourselves. And one of the things I've been exploring is that actually, loving God is tough, but it's also easy because we know God's going to love us. But when we love one another, we don't necessarily know that. We may love somebody, but we don't know that we're going to be loved back. So within all of this kind of exploration, I have a wedding sermon that I give at most weddings, and I include in it a little portion from a book. This is a translation written by a Lebanese author, Khalil the Prophets. It's kind of a classic. When I was in high school, everybody was reading it, and I thought, I don't understand this, I don't get it. Now I'm older, I get it. So this is something that I share in wedding sermons, but I also think it's really important in our relationships with one another, whether it's as friends, as family, in community, between communities, between nations, and between our faith communities. But it is talking about marriage and love. Let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. Even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. So it's it's going against all of that Hollywood romanticism about relationships. It says you have to do everything together, and everything has to be absolutely perfect. It's saying no, don't do everything together. You love one another because of your differences. So enjoy those differences, celebrate them, let them be the music played on a lute. And even in the Quran, we heard it. I think it was one of the first things that was said this morning by Karen Armstrong. She recited from the Quran that particular part that says, "We were created different so that we may know one another," and that difference means there's a curiosity about one another. We want to. Okay, they're different. Why are they different? What makes them tick? There's a curiosity and a joy in that. So why don't we get along? Why do we have all the problems and all the conflicts that we have? There's a book that I've taken a lot of inspiration from. It's called Happy City by Charles Montgomery, and it's kind of written around a lot of the research on the happiness index, and I encourage you to look it up. I want to read a little bit. They tell about the mayor of Bogota, Enrique Peñalosa. Now, he's a mayor of a city who needs bodyguards, but he rides a bicycle. He's not gonna get in a fancy car to go to work. He rides a bicycle, so his bodyguards also have to ride the bicycle to keep up. And as he rides through the city, he's waving to everybody. Because he believes he needs to be accessible, and he needs to be able to see the people of the city in which he's working. So we're quoting him. he says, we're living an experiment. We might not be able to fix the economy. We might not be able to make everyone as rich as Americans. But we can design the city to give people dignity, to make them feel rich. The city can make them happier. If we defined our success in terms of income per capita, we'd have to accept ourselves as second or third-rate societies, as a bunch of losers. No, the city needed a new goal. We needed to make Bogotans happier. And what are our needs for happiness? We need to walk, just as birds need to fly. We need to be around other people. We need beauty. We need contact with nature. And most of all, we need to not be excluded. We need to feel that there's some sort of equality. Now, what a lot of the research in this book comes out with is that happiness doesn't come from level of wealth. It doesn't matter whether it's a poor or wealthy society. That doesn't make for happiness or unhappiness. What makes for happiness is if there's an equality of opportunity in access to making a home, to education, to health care, to employment between all members of a community. It doesn't mean everybody has the same ability, but they all have equality in opportunity of access. This is the recipe for happiness. Introduce an element of fear, of inequality, that one group or an individual has greater opportunity, or is the reason that others are prevented from opportunity, and suddenly there's a decline in happiness. This is the introduction of fear. Really, fear is what is used to manipulate people and to whip up emotions. But if you give an opportunity again for people to not be afraid, they will leap at it. I'm going to share an odd little story. Okay, 5 minutes, right? I'm also a parish priest, and I have a little tiny village, and you know what? I'm not integrated yet. It's something I'm not used to at all. Really tiny rural Hertfordshire village. I love them to bits, but I'm still not quite used to it. It's one of those places that has a clay pigeon shoot at Christmas. Guns, and I tell them, I've lived in all kinds of places all over the world, but I've never lived anywhere where I've heard so much gunfire and so many helicopters, mainly because people have helipads. It's really odd. So when I first went, I thought, you know what, they're going to know what I'm about. So I said to them, you know, look, all of these young people that are going over and they're fighting with Daesh, these are our young people. These are the best of our young people. These are the ones that want to be heroes. And why are they going? Because we're not giving them hope, and we're not giving them the opportunity to be a hero. So what we need to do is we need to bring them back, and we need to give them hope, and we need to give them the chance to be a hero. And you know what I want to do? I want to bring them here, because you've got lovely farms and horses, and don't you think that would be a really great idea to give them an opportunity for the future? That was a scary thing to do. But you know what? You know what was really beautiful? They jumped at it. They said, that's a really great idea. What can we do? They convinced me that if you give people the opportunity to not be afraid, they will jump at it. Because what we really want is to love and to care for one another and to not be afraid. Nobody wants to raise their children or to live in a place where they're afraid of something. So really, we need to give one another the chance to not be afraid. This fear is when we put people in boxes because we're afraid, or when we put ourselves in a box. What did all these extreme groups, particularly the far right, do? They put themselves in a box and say, we're different, we want you to be afraid of us. So let's not be afraid of them. Let's not be afraid of Trump. That's a hard one, isn't it? I'm going to read something really quickly because I want to get on to how tough love is, really. But there was also something else I wanted to share with you. This is a book by Amin Maalouf on identity. I think it was written 20 years ago. But I think really what I also want to emphasize is the importance of integrating, oh boy, that word, integrating, bringing together our multiple identities, because we all have them. He writes, "Would I exist more authentically if I cut off a part of myself? To those who ask the question, I patiently explain that I was born in Lebanon, lived there until I was 27, that Arabic is my mother tongue, that it was in Arabic translation I first read Dumas and Dickens and Gulliver's Travels, and that it was in my native village, the village of my ancestors, that I experienced the pleasures of childhood and heard some of the stories that were later to inspire my novels. How could I forget all of that? How could I cast it aside? On the other hand, I have lived for 22 years on the soil of France. I drank her water and wine. Every day my hands touched her ancient stones. I write my books in her language. Never again will she be a foreign country to me. So am I half French, half Lebanese? Of course not. Identity can't be compartmentalized. I haven't got several identities. I've got just one, made up of many components combined together in a mixture that is unique to every individual. So when I talked about each of us are a little bit odd, a little bit strange, this is it. Each of us are unique for our own reasons. Simon Keyes is the former director of St. Ethelburga's in the City, Center for Peace and Reconciliation, quoted somebody else, but I just remember it was him that said it. He said, we can push a button in eras, the means of war are increasingly sophisticated. You can push a button in Arizona and blow up a city across the globe. The means of peace are increasingly simple. They're about us meeting one-on-one and having those conversations. Now that's not easy. Love isn't easy. Recently, Archbishop Tutu said, those who think that forgiveness is for wimps have never tried it. So I want to read you one more little thing from Khalil Gibran on love. When love beckons, follow. Though his ways are hard and steep, and when his wings enfold you, yield. Though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you, and when he speaks to you, believe in him. Though his voice may shatter your dreams as the north wind lays waste the garden, for even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so he is for your pruning. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tenderest branches that quiver in the sun, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Like sheaves of corn, he gathers you to himself. He threshes you to make you naked. He sifts you to free you from your husks. He grinds you. He kneads you until you are pliant. And then he assigns you to his sacred fire, that you may become sacred bread for God's sacred feast. All these things shall love do to you, that you may know the secrets of your own heart.